Okay, welcome everyone. We're pleased to have you join us for this conversation between Mark Bekkering, our Green Party of Ontario candidate in the Scarborough Southwest riding during this election period. I think we can call Mark the father of Transform TO, Toronto's climate action plan. And we're also joined by John Stephenson, director of the Boltzmann Institute, and someone with a wealth of experience in implementing district heating and cooling systems. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for taking part in this discussion.
My pleasure.
Mark, let's start with you. Let us know your background with the city, what led to the creation of Transform TO, and how does it encompass the issue of thermal energy systems? How did that fit into the plan? And we'll start with that. Go ahead, Mark.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. And John, it's nice to meet you. So I retired from the city 5 years ago, but for 13 years, I worked as manager of policy and research in the city's environment and energy division, now called Environment and Climate Change, and had a number of different responsibilities, but the major responsibility was the climate change file. In 2008, when David Miller was mayor, my group wrote the first climate change plan for the city, led to a number of different initiatives. And then a few years later, when John Tory was mayor, it was decided it was time to renew that climate change plan. And working with the Toronto Atmospheric Fund as a partner, we prepared Transform TO, which council unanimously adopted, and it identified the various steps and actions that as a city, business, and community collectively we need to take if we want to achieve a net zero future by the year 2050 or close to net zero. But it also identified how we could take those actions in such a way that it would save people money, generate jobs, and provide equitable access to people. In the context of today's discussion, which is about thermal energy, we identified that it is a real opportunity for the city, or we feel it was a real opportunity for the city to help reduce our emissions and provide us with a little bit more energy security. But I'm a policy and research person. I'm not an expert in this area, and that's why we've invited John to come and chat with us. I'll turn it over to you, John, to introduce yourself.
All right, sure. Well, I'm one of the founders of the Boltzmann Institute a couple of years ago, and I'm a project manager of the major research project, which is ongoing right now, which we call What We'll See Down Two Pathways towards net zero in buildings. And the one pathway is the one more or less endorsed by Transform TO in a big way, which is electrification. And this is almost all three levels of government and many, many NGOs just assume that electrification is the only way to go. But as you pointed out, you yourself recognized that there was a lot of potential in thermal energy. And in our project, we're looking at the implications of thermal energy as a second pathway. We're comparing them, we're comparing the cost to the consumers, and full disclosure, the cost is much less through thermal energy to the consumers in the long run.
Wow.
Now, the snag is there's a cost up front, and municipalities don't have any money to take this on.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's going to take both levels of government supporting municipalities to a much greater extent than they have done. The province, for instance, It should actually, in our view, the province should require all municipalities to engage in a proper heating plan. Now, I don't want to disparage Transform TO,
No.
but I am very familiar with it, by the way. I must have read all his reports several times. But what is really needed is a closer look at the heat demand of all buildings, the heat demand by hour of both heating and cooling, and thinking out of the optimal engineering way or the optimal way of meeting that demand, which may be electrification in some cases. For a long time, it may be keeping gas on as a sort of a hybrid system with heat pumps and gas for the peak demands. And there are other areas where it's thermal energy. Now, this has really not been done to the extent that it needs to be in Canada. And I speak from, well, 50 years in the energy business, I like to say, because, and that's counting retirement, because I never really did retire. Uh, but that included 27 years with Ontario Hydro and Toronto Hydro, and 15 years with a small engineering company for whom I'd been a client for many years. So they had to give me a job, didn't they, when I took early retirement. And that was
Yes.
FEB Energy in Vaughan, who were an affiliate of FEB Sweden, one of the premier district energy consultants in the world. And
Okay.
so in those 15 years of FEB, I was involved in somewhere from 100 to 200 district heating potential feasibility studies, of which about 2 dozen were built, including several in the GTHA, which perhaps we'll mention later. Now,
Yeah.
maybe that's enough of a spiel for me. I don't want to hog the limelight here. Back to you.
Okay, John, maybe we could, for people who aren't familiar with district energy, if we can get back to the basic definition. What is it? What's involved? Thermal storage, thermal systems of transmission. How does that all work?
Great question. And let me give homage to the person we named our institute after, Ludwig Boltzmann, who was the first, is an eminent 19th century Austrian physicist who explained to us all that thermal energy is nothing more than the kinetic energy of molecules, either moving or swimming around or flying around in gases, bumping into each other and transfer energy, much like billiard balls. And that's what we call heat transfer. And it's the transfer of thermal energy from one place to another. And that's what district energy does. It transfers thermal energy from some source mostly through underground pipes, usually, to customers' buildings, through heat exchangers. And so the district heating loop uh, interfaces with the customer's internal loop in a simple heat exchanger. And heat exchangers are just that. They are simple, reliable, they last forever, they never break down, they're cheap, and that's all a building needs in its basement. It doesn't need a gas furnace, a gas boiler, a heat pump. And those, like sometimes called energy transfer stations, are provided by the district energy company. They're designed, built, maintained,
Mhm.
operated by the district energy company, so the building owner can just forget that. He just has to focus on looking after his tenants if it's a commercial building. He doesn't have to worry at all about the heating system. And that service can be provided, almost, it could be provided to every building in Toronto, actually. Uh, the To get them started does require some upfront assistance
Mhm.
in all cases that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of them. The upfront assistance that would be required from senior levels of government, it might be 10% of the total capital cost, for instance, somewhere around there. It's worth it because
Mhm.
in the long run, you are going to save a lot of, first of all, you can solve the emissions problem from those buildings. The
Yes.
buildings themselves have no emissions, no scope one emissions, that is. And the Scope 2 emissions, which is at the energy centers, if they still burn gas, that can be first of all, it can be regulated a lot easier than millions of buildings, and it can be changed to a low carbon source. And that's what so many district heating companies throughout the world are in the process of doing. They're changing out their fossil fueled boilers to a multitude of low carbon sources. And I have to mention thermal storage because that's the key. Heating is seasonal, it's extremely peaky, it's very unsuitable to be supplied by electricity. The gas company does it very well. I mean, gas is great. The gas system does a great job, except for one thing, and I don't need to tell you what that is. But if you think you're going to replace that multi-billion dollar business, gas business, without a lot of planning and thinking,
Yes.
and coordination between the three levels of government and the private sector and other stakeholders, it's not going to happen. And it's not
Mhm.
happening. And it will not happen until the municipalities get serious about heat planning in depth. Again, no disparaging to Transform TO, but I would say you needed a lot more staff than you have. And I'm talking about staff to manage things, not to do the technical work. You can hire technical specialists. And that heat planning has to be done. And that would identify potential thermal energy systems to the point that someone could see how this could be made attractive for the private sector to come in and help get them started. So it's not a strain on the limited resources of the municipality. The municipality could merely put out a request for expressions of interest, and there are big private sector companies who would come in. Now they may need a grant, maybe part of the mix. For example, Markham District Energy recently announced a $300 million project of which 270 million was lent to them, half by the CIB, half by the CIBC, which is a commercial bank, and but they also got $29 million grant. Now I
Mhm.
can bet the economics of that project hinged on that grant. If they didn't get that grant, there'd be no debt
Yeah,
financing.
would
There'd
be a
be no
return on
the,
investment.
exactly.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, it's possible to have a viable return on investment.
Yeah.
And it will save the customers so much money in the long run because if you were to meet those very peaky heat loads with electricity, you're going to be building many nuclear plants, many wind turbines, lots of transmission, lots of distribution. It's going to be in the hundreds of billions. In
Yeah.
fact, it's not going to happen. And so you're just not going to meet your emission reductions.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
okay.
yeah. So if I could summarize, like, so it offers us an opportunity to do two different things, and I mean, it offers an opportunity to do a lot of different things, but the two big things I'm hearing you say is can help us reduce emissions, depending, of course, on the thermal source that's used, but obviously it's a big geothermal or waste from other sources is waste heat from other sources and so on.
Yes,
And then the second is the demand that we're going to place on our electrical grid. And it's not just the conversion of houses to, say, heat pumps or anything, but it's also, I would imagine, the electrical grid's going to be, the demand on it's going to grow with computing, artificial intelligence, that kind of stuff also. And if we want to grow economically, like if we want to, become a province that has a lot of server centers or provide that kind of service, we're going to need to reduce the demand on the electrical grid. And then the other benefits, I think people probably get jobs and local independence and the energy. So
that's true.
yeah, things like that
Uh,
also. Yeah. Okay.
uh,
So Mark, given what John has laid out,
Mhm.
how would you advise the people at Transform TO at the city? What can they do to forward the cause?
Yeah, well, how could they do to forward the cause? Yeah, it's as John said, I mean, it starts with resources,
Yeah,
and the right kind of resources to help sort of present the business case to the right authorities, to develop the financial business case, the staffing, and identify the potential partners like financial institutions, companies that can deliver the service. Because I mean, the city did at one time own Enwave, which was a district energy system or company, but they sold it off because the city realistically doesn't have the capital to grow that kind of activity. It needs private investment. Um, but we need to be proactively looking. I would suggest that the city and the province need to be proactively looking for the real opportunities, and that might come from the heat mapping that John's talking about. I also think we need to look at the redevelopment opportunities that are happening in our city. I did read that there is consideration for the redevelopment that's going to happen in Downsview, that it would be powered by geothermal. I don't know if John, if you know more, but I just read the headline basically. But I know in my own neighborhood, there's the Golden Mile, and because of the Eglinton Crosstown, which isn't open yet, but when it opens, will continue to facilitate massive redevelopment, and they're talking about 60,000 new residents, and it's going to require a complete redesign of the street network. I would think as a city, that would be a great opportunity for us to be uh, thinking district energy powered by geothermal or some other thermal source, and put in the piping because, as John said, the pipe needs to go underground, and we can put that in now, and then with the help of the province, provide the financial grant to maybe get a company engaged in building a district energy system, and maybe some appropriate regulatory changes that sort of mandate connection. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't all the different things that would need to happen, but it's an opportunity that's being missed right now.
Okay, you've mentioned a number of things.
Mhm.
could I jump in,
Mhm.
Eric? Because I think you tried to pin the effect on the wrong donkey there when you asked what the city could do. From my
Yeah.
experience, and we've all Mark and his former colleagues, the city have already got some very well qualified people. The city have got people who understand this
Mhm.
business. They've got them.
Yeah.
It's the province that is lacking. The province sets up a Ministry of Energy and Electrification. It should be a Ministry of Energy and Electrification and Thermal Energy.
Mhm.
It's the province that needs to wake up about thermal energy and give the municipalities more support. And in fact, as I said, require the municipalities to do very detailed heat planning, not just plan, the plan, it's a part of the planning process, and the planners do it very well, but they need to do it, the heating part, in much more detail to
Yeah.
and understand it. And that will bring on the sort of things that Mark was talking about. And
Yeah.
so, I'm sorry, I just had to butt in there
Mhm.
because something I feel very strongly about. I know a lot of people in the city. I used to know Mark's old boss, Jim Baxter. I know people who are there now. They understand this perfectly well. They don't have the support. They don't have the resources. It's the province which is asleep at the switch. I'm sorry, and on the
Mhm.
thermal energy file. I'm being quite
Yeah.
blunt here, but
Yeah.
it's true.
No, no, you're right. And I mean, yes, I mean the city's doing some pretty amazing stuff. I know that they're working on the waste heat from sewage at the in the west end of the city, which sounds like a really exciting opportunity. And I know in Vancouver they already did something like that. And in Vancouver's
Yes.
case, I'm pretty sure the province was at the table to help make that happen. Uh,
I'm not sure.
okay.
Vancouver has a charter. Vancouver is a
Yes,
charter
you're right. They have a
city,
little bit more
and
autonomy.
it can do a bit more than the city of
Yeah,
Toronto.
that's
But
true.
yeah, I mean, municipalities have started these projects. There's about 240 in the country. There's about 40 in Ontario. There's
Yeah.
several in the GTA. They do start, but to do it on a big scale, which
Yeah.
is what is needed. And the other thing I might comment on is it's not just new development. Absolutely new development, like the Downsview, the Golden Mile, and I have an area in the neighborhood I live in, the development of the old Christa's bakery site, which
Mhm.
is due to have about 15 condos, high-rise condos.
Yeah.
These big developments, they definitely need heat plants. But what I am saying, the whole city needs a heat plant because the existing buildings
Hmm.
will still be here. A lot of them, 70 or 80% of
Yeah.
existing buildings will still be here in 50 years' time. So what are we going to do about the existing buildings? And that is even more difficult than redevelopment in some ways. In other ways, it's easier because you know what the heat loads are.
Oh, right.
You know what you can forecast the revenue streams from existing buildings more than the redevelopment. And you know it's there. One problem with redevelopments, in my experience, is that they take forever and they're subject to delays and so forth. So, yes, absolutely, still plan on redevelopment, but
Mhm.
the existing buildings. As for mandating connection, that has been done. I think you can only mandate connection if you're giving a service that costs no more than what they're paying for already. Then
Mhm.
they probably don't mind being mandated. But
Yeah.
if you try to force them to pay more than what they're paying right now, you're going to get a tremendous political backlash. It'd be
Yeah.
like, and so that's not feasible. So sorry, I had to interject
Yeah.
those observations.
Well, that's a very good point. It's yeah. Walking in and telling people you're gonna have to pay more than you already do is not gonna work, that's for sure. There's
Exactly.
no doubt about that. It's it has to the money that has to save people money or at least keep them at par. So,
Yes.
but talking about existing neighborhoods and so on, like I was under the impression that it might be difficult and challenging to do it in existing neighborhoods because of all the infrastructure that's under streets, and the way this neighborhoods are built. I remember a number of years ago, there was a small neighbor, a group of residents in Cabbagetown. It was about 15 years ago. And we gave, through one of the programs that I was managing, we gave them a small grant to look at the feasibility of a geothermal system. They'd identified that everybody on the block was roughly this had a furnace that was roughly the same age, and they were all going to have to start replacing them. So they collectively thought, well, maybe we could do some sort of connected geothermal system. Now, the neighborhood was all townhouses, no yards. So, and anyway, the long and short of it is they identified along with the city that it would be almost impossible to put in any of the piping given the infrastructure under the streets already. But it'd be interesting your thoughts.
Well,
Mhm.
um, You, I've experience of putting pipes in congested streets. For example, the Regent Park Energy, when we
Yeah.
designed and constructed Regent Park Energy, we put four big pipes in Dundas Street East from Parliament to River Street. And that's
Hmm.
a major Toronto artery.
Right.
Now, okay, full disclosure, the TTC shut down the road to build new streetcar tracks at the same time.
Oh, at the same time, which is
But
an efficient thing to do.
yeah, yeah. But it goes back to your comments about the Golden Mile. But in my experience, there's always a way to do it.
Yeah.
It can be
Mhm.
difficult, but difficult is not impossible.
Possible. Mm.
And
Thank you.
your friends in Cabbagetown My take on that is like many things I've seen, it was almost too small to succeed.
Yeah.
You need big pockets. You need, I hate to say this, but big companies who know what they're doing. European companies like Vattenfall, and well, our own company. We have companies here in Toronto, Enwave, Creative Energy, Corex. There are, you need district energy companies who know what they're doing, have got the capital behind them, who do a thorough appraisal upfront of the fees. I mean, they're not going to do this if it's going to, if they can't do it.
Yeah.
But maybe it could have been done with a sufficient government grant, and maybe that government grant would have been justified, taking
Mhm.
everything into account. I don't know. So I uh, I certainly have not given up on putting pipes in all of the city streets, and I know it's difficult, but hey, I've been a construction manager putting pipes in the
Yeah.
ground in Markham. I know what's involved in putting pipes in the ground. It's not rocket science, you know. It is fairly technical. You do the,
Sure.
you know, the X-raying and all of that, the welding, but it's not rocket science.
Mhm.
And People take for granted the electricity system. They
Yeah.
flip on a switch and the power comes on, and they have no idea what a complicated, expensive system it is to deliver that power. I mean,
Yeah.
what goes on inside of a nuclear reactor? I have no idea. It's a mystery. Even electricity is a mystery to me, you know? But my main message is district heating is simple and it is very amenable to detailed feasibility studies which can define how to do things, what it's going to cost, and then you have to think, you know, is this
Yeah.
how much is this worth it in the big picture?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
just one last question. Sorry. Oh, I was sorry, Eric. As you know, I'm running for office, and if I were to get elected, or when I get elected, maybe I should say, um, what would you recommend? I mean, you've already said the province needs to be at the table, and it isn't at the table today. But maybe if you elaborate a little bit more about what role the province really should be playing, I appreciate.
Okay, well, they have a Ministry of Energy and Electrification, and as I say, they should add to that thermal energy because thermal energy is such a big part of the total energy use in our society and a big part of emissions. You know, it's
Yeah.
top emitter in Toronto and the GTHA is second in the province. It deserves specific attention and to realize that it's a provincial thing, it's a local thing. District energy
Hmm.
is a local thing. The decisions have to be local. A lot of the spade work, a lot of the heavy lifting has to be local. But the province, just as it supports municipalities in various other ways they need, it needs to support municipalities more in the realm of thermal energy. And
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say that it should emulate the European Union, which has a directive that all member states shall require all their municipalities to develop heating plans within the next 2 years.
Right.
And they're doing it. And we are having a couple of experts from Germany are going to come over and speak at a conference we're holding at the U of T on March the 20th. I realize that's after the election, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, that's okay.
But anyway,
Yeah.
we're going to have them come over, and then we're inviting government, all three levels of government, and corporate real estate, and some engineers to talk about it, to talk about how feasible do they think the application of those basic ideas would be
Hmm.
here. And so we had developed the answer to your question. We're developing it. We're developing it.
Yeah,
But
no, that's okay.
I think it does definitely involve not just letting the municipalities twist in the wind
No.
and figure this out for themselves. The province has to be a big, strong, big brother to help them through this because it impacts the electricity system, which is a provincial jurisdiction. And
Right.
the province has a responsibility for keeping electricity rates down. And they should not be just sleepwalking into a situation where this huge peak heat demand of a very low utilization is put on the electricity system, which will mean excessive construction of power plants and infrastructure. And we've seen this movie before. Hydro rates go shooting up for
Hmm.
several years, and that hurts, and it particularly hurts low incomes, the hydro rates.
Yes.
And so that's what they should be looking into. They should basically form a group to specifically consider the conversion off of gas. If they want to get to if they sincere in wanting zero emissions, and that involves getting off of gas, that's a big undertaking. They should specifically look at that from a provincial point of view and not just assume the market will take care of it, because it won't.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So yeah.
John, can I
Mhm.
ask you? You gave a presentation to the Citizens Climate Lobby, and a couple of things struck me that um, the way things are going, our energy, if we're going to go and electrify all the heating with with air source heat pumps,
Mhm.
it'll lead to a tripling of our energy bills, our electricity bills, and we need about 5 new nuclear plants to accommodate that. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, all the details will be in our report, which will be issued in the middle of April. But generally speaking, we have done something that I don't think hardly anyone has done, and we have assessed the heating peak in the whole province. We've looked at the peaks in different municipalities, and no one measures the heating peak. The gas company doesn't measure the heating peak. You're lucky if they measure your monthly consumption. It's the peak demand, the demand on the coldest day. That determines the amount of infrastructure you have. We have determined that, and we've applied it to an electricity system planning exercise, which I imagine is similar to what the IESO must do, in that we figured out what kinds of generation, how much nuclear, how much wind, how much solar, and natural gas is going to get zero emissions, and then which is the lowest cost of doing that. And we have added that on to the ISO's 2050. The ISO already has an estimate for 2050, but it doesn't include a tremendous amount of electrification of heating. It includes more data centers, EVs, and natural growth, and so on. So
Mhm.
on top of the ISO 2050, we've put the extra heating demand if all the gas, just looking at the gas heated buildings, which are mainly in urban areas. Mainly in urban areas where you have gas heating. And it's about 70% of all buildings. And if we have looked at that, and we've looked at what generation it's going to take. And to get to say, we're assuming that people are going to go on zero emissions at least by 2050. I know the clean electricity regulations were aiming at 2035, and they've kind of backpedaled somewhat so that in effect they can get away with things until about 2050. But 2050, I think it's reasonable to think you could have a zero emissions grid. And you
Mhm.
could, but it's not easy. And even we are burning some renewable natural gas. Even we have, in our scheme of things, we had to have some gas turbines, and we're assuming you will buy that renewable natural gas, which is limited in supply, but we assume that you're going to get some of that renewable natural gas for the peaks. And we have a model which has all the unit costs, all the unit and operating costs from
Mhm.
American good sources, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the US, actually better sources than the ISO used it, in my opinion. And we've put that together, and that's the basis of those calculations Eric mentioned, and that is all going to be laid out very clearly in this report that will be issued in April. So
in
this is
April.
fair warning to the government that it's coming.
Yeah, it's well, it is a little scary, I guess, because
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
little scary, but you
everybody
know,
is,
it's avoidable. It's
yes.
avoidable if they would
Yeah.
pay more attention to thermal networks.
Hmm.
And if they don't, they just won't get the emission reductions from buildings. That's all.
No, no, because we'll have to just keep adding more natural gas plants to generate electricity and so on. Yeah, I hear you. Wow. Yeah, because we're electrifying transportation, we're electrifying our heating, it's and cooling. Yeah, okay.
There's we have a large data center being built in our riding, Scarborough Southwest, by Birchmount and Danforth Avenue.
Mhm.
The old Eli Lilly plant is being converted,
Oh, yeah.
and we always hear in the news about AI, how much drain that's taking on our electricity grid,
Mhm.
as well as cryptocurrency and all that. Um, are we focusing on how to manage the thermal thermal transfer from data centers? Is that something that we should keep in mind? Any
Uh,
thoughts?
de Definitely, you should keep in mind, for example, the city of Amsterdam has a heat plan, very preliminary. It's 5 years old, and it has a long list of all its data centers and how much heat it can get out of them. This is the extent of the planning that you need to do. All those data centers, and I understand Toronto Hydro has about 5 applications for connection from data centers. Someone should be looking at how much heat you can get out of them and how
Mhm.
that could interface with thermal energy systems. Because they need cooling anyway. They're just going to put the heat into the atmosphere. And by the way, getting back to this aspect of capacity factor, yeah, the data centers and the EVs, they're going to put a strain on the electricity system, but they are adding value to society. The
Yes.
EVs, for instance, are very nice for the owners, like electricity is a lot cheaper than gasoline. And I know several people who own EVs and they're very happy with them. But the data centers, they create value. They create. There's a reason people are building because they create economic value, and society should find a way of making sure that economic value goes in. A lot of it goes not to just to Amazon and Google and Apple, etc., but stays in the community, that economic value. But from the point of view of a Toronto Hydro, they're great because they're a constant revenue stream.
Mhm.
Whereas if you try to electrify heating, it's not a constant electricity system. It's the same for 200 megawatts of heating. You get a far less revenue than 200 megawatts of data centers. So from Toronto Hydro's point of view, which is owned by the city, it should rather have data centers than heat the same megawatts of heating. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. Oh, that's cool. Oh, well, I don't know if I have any. No, I don't think I have any. I don't have any more questions. This is fantastic. I really appreciate your time.
No, my
And,
pleasure.
yeah, that's
Are we going to have politicians attending your conference?
Well, I hope so. We've invited some. They should go. Uh,
Can Mark
the
go?
uh, the mark is well, it's $75, but
oh
you
no.
but you get a nice lunch for that,
Oh, well, there you go.
and
I'd like to go for
it's
sure.
it's a good place to network with people who are sort of concerned about
Yeah.
thermal energy. There will be other politicians there. There will be ministry people there. both levels of government. I hope the city people, I know Toronto Hydro is sending some people just to listen, and it'll be a good play. There'll be about 120 people there. It's in the faculty club, in
Mhm.
Toronto, U of T. So they have a limit on people, which is 120. We have about 60 registrants so far, but there's about 5 weeks to go. So
Yeah.
I think the politicians should go. I wish a whole slug of people would go from the Ministry of Energy and Electrification. That's who I wish would go, uh, so that they could, you know, more pick up more of the culture of what's involved in thermal energy, because a lot of them seem to think it's from outer space or something, but it's actually a very old, simple technology which
Technology.
we already have. And people like me who've been in the industry 50 years, we can see very clearly how we could have a lot more of it, and it would keep energy costs down for
Mhm.
customers, as well as a clear path to zero emissions.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I agree completely. The electricity rates keep going up. The province is subsidizing to the
yeah,
tune of $7 billion a year now
yeah,
to
yeah,
keep to keep the rates down. So even for that alone is
yeah,
a
yeah.
justification for start looking at exploring alternatives like you've just well articulated for us. Um, so I definitely will be signing up. It's March 21st, right?
20th, March
Oh,
20th.
March 20th. I'm
You
sorry.
can you can find it on Eventbrite. Actually, I'll send you a link. Now I've
That would
heard
be
you
great because I'd
interested.
like to include that. And yeah,
Hopefully, you'll be our representative in Queen's Park at that time, and
Yes, no, that would be
that
great.
would be
Yeah,
amazing, and
that
it would
would
be
be
even more
amazing.
valuable. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I
okay,
guess
I think we've covered a lot of ground, and
I
I
have.
appreciate everybody's input. We learned a lot, and
Mhm.
I
For
want to
sure.
thank you, John, for your contribution, and look forward to continuing this discussion in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Okay,
So
bye.
you turn
Bye.
off the recording?
Oops, I pressed the wrong button. There we go. Okay,
You
we'll
got a
do.
little doggy there.
Yeah, my doggy's scratching.
Uh,
Really, I think I'm still. Where do I end the recording? There we go. Oh, here. Stop recording.